It was a moment so unbelievable, it felt like something out of a dream. In a quiet, forgotten village, a dog, a simple, loyal creature, did something no one could have imagined. She wasn't just protecting a baby, she was nursing it as if it were her own pup. A human baby, abandoned and left to the mercy of the cold, had found an unlikely savior in this dog. Word spread quickly, and soon, villagers gathered to see this incredible sight: a dog cradling the fragile child, shielding it from the elements, and feeding it with the love and instinct of a mother. People whispered in disbelief: how could an animal, often overlooked, display such boundless compassion for a human child? Was it fate, a miracle, or something far greater than anyone could comprehend? This isn't just a story about a dog and a baby. It's a story that will challenge everything you think you know about loyalty, love, and the unspoken bond between living beings. By the time you hear the full tale, you'll be moved to tears, and perhaps you'll see the world and humanity itself in a whole new light. So stay with us. What began as a moment of survival would grow into a story of hope, kindness, and the remarkable power of love. This is a tale you'll never forget. It was a bitterly cold winter morning. The sun struggled to rise over the mist-shrouded village, casting a pale glow over frost-covered trees and empty streets. The silence was almost eerie, broken only by the distant howling of a dog. The sound was raw, filled with anguish, and it pierced through the stillness like an urgent cry for help. A group of villagers, bundled in heavy coats, were heading out early to graze their cattle. They stopped in their tracks, startled by the haunting sound. "What could it be?" one of them murmured. Curiosity soon outweighed their hesitation, and together they followed the cries to the edge of a dense jungle that bordered their village. As they drew closer, the sight that awaited them would be etched into their memories forever. There, sitting on the frozen ground, was a dog. Her fur was matted with dirt, her body shivering in the cold. But her eyes, those deep, sorrowful eyes, were fixed on something small and fragile lying before her. A baby, a newborn human baby. The villagers gasped, their breath visible in the icy air. The child was naked, its tiny body trembling against the freezing earth. Its cries were faint, barely audible, as if the cold had stolen the strength from its little lungs. "Who could abandon a child like this?" one villager whispered, his voice trembling with shock. "What kind of monster would leave a baby out here to die?" The group huddled together, each one silently asking themselves the same question. But no one had an answer. Fear and confusion began to set in. What if the child was cursed? What if taking it in brought misfortune to their homes? One by one, the villagers backed away, unwilling to take responsibility for the helpless infant. But the dog didn't move. She remained by the baby's side, her body curled protectively around it. When one of the villagers dared to step closer, the dog let out a low growl, not of aggression, but of warning. She wasn't going to let anyone harm the baby. Then, to everyone's astonishment, the dog gently picked up the child in her mouth. The villagers braced themselves, fearing the worst. But instead of hurting the baby, the dog carried it carefully to a patch of softer ground, away from the icy frost. She laid the child down gently, her movements as tender as a mother's touch. The villagers were speechless. One by one, they began murmuring among themselves. "Have you ever seen anything like this? Why is she acting this way? It's as if the baby is her own." The dog sat beside the baby, her large eyes filled with an emotion no one could quite describe. Was it love? Compassion? Whatever it was clear she had taken on the role of the child's protector. For hours, the dog stayed by the baby's side, shielding it from the biting cold with her own body. The villagers watched from a distance, unsure of what to do. Some wanted to step in and help, but fear held them back. Others simply couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. As the morning wore on, word of the miraculous sight began to spread throughout the village. More people gathered at the jungle's edge, their faces a mixture of wonder and disbelief. No one could explain it, but one thing was certain: this dog was no ordinary animal. She was acting with a love and devotion that rivaled even the most caring of humans. But behind this incredible act of compassion lay a troubling mystery. Who was the baby? Where had it come from? And why had it been left to die in the freezing cold? The villagers didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of a story that would change their lives forever. News of the abandoned baby and the extraordinary actions of the dog spread quickly. It reached every corner of the village, and soon even neighboring towns were buzzing with the story. Among those who heard was a woman named Aisha. She lived in the nearby town, known for her generosity and compassionate nature. Aisha was no ordinary woman. Her beauty was matched only by the kindness of her heart. But despite her wealth and the admiration of those around her, there was an emptiness in her life. After 5 years of marriage, she and her husband, Imran, had not been blessed with a child. This void had left a deep ache in her soul, one that no amount of riches or goodwill could fill. When Aisha heard of the abandoned baby and the dog's incredible devotion, she felt an undeniable pull in her heart. This is a sign, she thought to herself. Perhaps Allah has sent this child into my life for a reason. Without hesitation, she gathered a few supplies and set out for the village. The journey through the frost-covered roads was long and cold, but Aisha's resolve was unshaken. When she finally arrived at the jungle's edge, she was greeted by a sight that took her breath away. The dog was still there, curled protectively around the baby. Despite the growing crowd of onlookers, the dog hadn't budged. Her eyes scanned the people cautiously, her body language warning them to keep their distance. Aisha's heart ached at the sight. The baby, so small and fragile, was nestled against the dog's body for warmth. Tears welled up in her eyes. If an animal can show this much love and compassion, she whispered to herself, why can't we humans do the same? She stepped forward cautiously, her movements slow and deliberate. The dog immediately tensed, letting out a low growl. Aisha stopped in her tracks, her gentle eyes meeting the dog's wary gaze. She understood immediately. The dog wasn't being aggressive. She was simply protecting the baby. Aisha reached into her bag and pulled out a small packet of food. She placed it on the ground, just a few steps away from the dog. The growling subsided as the dog sniffed the air, tempted by the offering. Slowly, the dog inched forward, her eyes never leaving Aisha. As the dog began to eat, Aisha knelt down and spoke softly. I'm not here to harm you, she said. I only want to help. Her voice was steady but filled with emotion. After a few moments, she reached for the baby. The dog froze but didn't stop her. It was as if she understood that Aisha's intentions were pure. Gently, Aisha picked up the baby, cradling it close to her chest. The child's tiny body felt cold against her own, but its soft cries assured her it was still alive. Tears streamed down Aisha's face as she looked at the baby's fragile features. From now on, you will be my child, she whispered. I will raise you as my own. The crowd watched in silence, moved by the scene before them. Even the dog seemed to relax, sitting back on her haunches as if she knew the baby was finally safe. Aisha returned home with the baby, her heart overflowing with both joy and responsibility. When she arrived, she found her husband, Imran, waiting at the door. His brows furrowed in confusion as she recounted the events of the day. Aisha, are you sure about this? He asked cautiously. We don't know anything about the child's origins. What if it brings trouble into our lives? Aisha held the baby tightly, her voice unwavering. If Allah has placed this child in our path, then there must be a reason. This is not trouble. It's a blessing, and I will not turn my back on it. Imran sighed, his resolve softening as he saw the determination in her eyes. If Allah has entrusted us with this responsibility, then so be it, he said. We will raise this child as our own. That night, Aisha and Imran gave the baby a name, Aman, meaning peace. They vowed to protect and nurture him, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. And as they prepared a warm bed for a man, the dog, too, found a place in their home. She remained close to the baby, never straying far, as if to ensure her role as a man's guardian was far from over. This was the beginning of a bond that would defy all expectations and change their lives forever. The small, once quiet household of Aisha and Imran was soon transformed into a place filled with life and laughter. Aman, the baby they had rescued from the brink of death, became the center of their world. From the very first night, Aisha cared for him with the kind of tenderness and devotion only a mother could give. She wrapped him in warm blankets, fed him, and stayed up for hours watching over him as he slept. Imran, too, grew attached to Aman. Though he had initially hesitated, his heart softened each time he saw the baby's tiny hands grasping his fingers or heard his soft coos filling the room. Aman wasn't just a child they had taken in. He had become their son, the answer to years of longing. The dog, who had been Aman's first protector, remained a constant presence in the household. Aisha and Imran couldn't bear to part with her after what she had done. She now had her own place in the corner of the house, where she could keep a watchful eye on Aman. The villagers began calling her Aman's guardian, a name that seemed to suit her perfectly. As days turned into weeks, Aman began to thrive. His cheeks grew fuller, his cries stronger, and his bright eyes often sparkled with curiosity. Every morning, Aisha would dress him in tiny clothes and carry him outside to feel the warmth of the sun on his skin. The dog would follow close behind, her loyalty unwavering. Despite the joy a man brought to their home, Aisha and Imran couldn't escape the whispers of the villagers. People were fascinated by the story of the abandoned baby and the dog, but they were also skeptical. Where did the baby come from? They would ask. Who left him in the jungle? Could it be a curse? These murmurs didn't bother Imran. Let them talk, he would say. Our responsibility is to this child, not to their opinions. Aisha, too, remained steadfast, pouring all her love into Aman and ignoring the judgment of others. But not all the villagers were critical. Some came to admire the family's courage and the unusual bond they shared with the dog. They would stop by the house bringing small gifts for Aman, or just to catch a glimpse of the child and his devoted guardian. It's as if the dog knows he's special, one woman remarked. She never lets him out of her sight. As Aman grew older, his bond with the dog deepened. When he began to crawl, she was right there beside him, her tail wagging happily as he tugged on it with his tiny hands. If Aman cried, the dog would bark loudly, calling Aisha to his side. The two were inseparable, and the villagers marveled at their connection. For Aisha, these moments were a gift. After years of longing for a child, she finally felt whole. She would often sit by a man's crib at night, whispering prayers of gratitude. You are our blessing, she would say softly. Allah brought you into our lives for a reason. Imran, too, found joy in the little things, watching Aman take his first wobbly steps with the dog gently nudging him forward, or hearing his laughter echo through the house as he played with his furry guardian. The once empty corners of their home were now filled with toys, laughter, and love. Still, there were moments of doubt. Isha couldn't help but wonder about Aman's future. What if the truth about his origins becomes a problem? She asked Imran one evening. What if society doesn't accept him? Imran placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. It doesn't matter where he came from, he said firmly. What matters is where he's going. And with us by his side, he will have a bright future. And so they continued to pour their love and effort into raising Aman, determined to shield him from the harshness of the world. The dog, ever watchful, became more than just a pet. She was a symbol of the unconditional love and loyalty that had brought their family together. Every day was a step forward, a reminder that miracles could come from the most unexpected places. Aman's laughter filled their home, and the dog's protective presence reminded them of the extraordinary events that had brought them together. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of their journey. For a while, life felt perfect in Aisha and Imran's home. Aman grew stronger and happier each day, and the dog remained his ever-watchful guardian. But outside the walls of their home, society was not as kind or understanding. The villagers, though curious at first, began to grow suspicious and restless. One afternoon, a local leader visited their home. His demeanor was stern, and his tone carried an air of authority. Imran, he said, stepping into the courtyard, are you sure it's wise to keep this child here? His origins are unknown. What if trouble follows him into your family? What will you do if one day questions about his true identity cause chaos in your home? Imran stood tall, his voice steady as he replied, This child is not a problem. He is a blessing. We do not know where he came from, but we know why he is here. Allah placed him in our care, and we will not abandon him because of fear or gossip. The leader frowned, clearly dissatisfied with Imran's answer. but he left without saying another word. Yet his visit sparked a new wave of rumors. People whispered behind Aisha and Imran's backs, questioning their decision. Some claimed the child was cursed. Others said raising a baby with a dog constantly by its side was unnatural and unholy. The gossip reached Aisha's ears, and though she tried to ignore it, the words lingered in her mind. One evening, as she watched a man sleeping peacefully with the dog curled beside him, she turned to Imran. "Do you think they're right?" she asked hesitantly. "What if this brings us trouble in the future?" Imran placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "People will always talk," he said softly, "but their words don't change the truth. This child was sent to us for a reason, and as long as we follow the path Allah has shown us, we will face whatever comes." Isha nodded, though a part of her heart still ached with worry. Despite the tension from the villagers, the dog remained an unshakable source of comfort. Her devotion to a man only grew stronger. One day, while a man was playing in the courtyard, a venomous snake slithered out from a nearby bush. The dog sprang into action, barking fiercely and placing herself between the snake and the child. With a quick, powerful leap, she chased the snake away, her bravery leaving Aisha and Imran in awe. "If it weren't for her, we could have lost him today," Aisha whispered, tears streaming down her face. Imran nodded, his heart filled with gratitude. Still, the societal pressures didn't let up. At school, Aman began to face teasing from his classmates. They mocked his unusual upbringing, saying things like, "Your dog is more like your parent than your real mother." The words stung, and a man often came home in tears. The dog, as if sensing his pain, would stay close to him during these times, resting her head on his lap or nudging him with her nose as if to say, "You're not alone." One evening, a man knelt beside her and whispered, "You're the best friend I've ever had. Don't leave me, okay?" The dog responded with a soft bark and a wag of her tail, her loyalty unwavering. The villagers, too, began to notice the bond between Aman and the dog. Some were amazed by it. "I've never seen a dog act this way," one man said. "It's as if she was meant to protect him." Others, however, remained skeptical. "It's unnatural," they muttered. "A child shouldn't be so close to an animal." A turning point came when a stranger passing through the village stopped at their home. He saw Aman playing with the dog and remarked, "I've traveled far and wide, but I've never seen such devotion in an animal. This dog isn't just protecting your child, it's teaching us what love really means." The words struck a chord with the villagers who overheard them. Slowly, some began to see the dog not as a threat, but as a symbol of loyalty and courage. But not everyone was convinced. One day, Jamil Sahab, a strong-willed and influential man from the village, confronted Aisha directly. "You should get rid of that dog," he said bluntly. "It has no place in your family. Animals and humans are not equals. You're bringing shame to our community." Aisha, calm but firm, replied, "This dog saved our son's life and continues to protect him every day. If that's shameful, then perhaps our community needs to rethink its values. For us, love and loyalty matter more than outdated beliefs." Imran added, "A creature that gives so much without expecting anything in return is a blessing, not a burden. We will not abandon her." Jamil Sahab left, his pride wounded, but his words sparked yet another round of heated debates among the villagers. Some supported Aisha and Imran, inspired by their courage. Others remained trapped in their prejudice, unable to accept what they couldn't understand. Despite the challenges, Aisha and Imran stayed true to their decision. They knew their love for Aman and the bond they shared with the dog was stronger than any judgment society could pass. And through it all, the dog remained a silent but steadfast symbol of their family's unity, proving time and time again that love and loyalty transcended all barriers. As the years passed, Aman began to grow into a bright, curious child who filled Aisha and Imran's lives with joy. From the very beginning, his bond with the dog was unlike anything anyone in the village had ever seen. She wasn't just a pet or a protector. She was his constant companion, a guardian who seemed to understand him better than most humans ever could. When Aman took his first wobbly steps, the dog was right there beside him, her watchful eyes ready to intervene if he stumbled. As he learned to run, she followed close behind, never letting him out of her sight. The villagers, who once whispered about the unnatural connection between the child and the dog, now watched in amazement. "It's as if she's his shadow," one man said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I've never seen anything like it." Every milestone in Aman's life was shared with his furry guardian. When he began speaking his first words, she barked enthusiastically, as though encouraging him to keep going. When Aman discovered the world outside their home, the dog was his silent guide, teaching him bravery by always being at his side. By the time Aman started school, their bond was stronger than ever. Each morning, the dog would walk him to the village school, staying just outside the gates until his classes ended. When Aman emerged, she was there, tail wagging, ready to escort him safely home. The other children laughed at first, calling him the boy with the dog, but Aman didn't care. To him, she was more than a dog. She was family. The villagers slowly began to recognize the depth of their bond. One elderly man remarked, "That dog isn't just protecting the boy. She's raising him. She's teaching him what loyalty means." As Aman grew older, the dog's influence on him became even more apparent. He began to display the same qualities that defined her: loyalty, courage, and an unshakable sense of empathy. One day, while playing with other children, he noticed a younger boy crying because he didn't have shoes. Without hesitation, Amon took off his own and gave them to the boy. "My mother says we should always help others," he explained simply. The act didn't go unnoticed. Villagers began to talk about a man in a different light. "He's kind-hearted, just like his parents," one woman said. "And maybe, just like that dog." But it wasn't just a man who grew. It was the dog's role, too. She had become more than just a protector. She was a symbol of love, an unspoken teacher who had shown Aman the meaning of selflessness. One day, as a man sat in the courtyard reading a school book, he paused to look at her. "You've taught me more than any book ever could," he said softly, reaching out to stroke her fur. The dog rested her head on his lap, her eyes filled with a quiet understanding. But their life wasn't without challenges. The whispers from society never completely disappeared. Some villagers still couldn't accept the idea of a dog being treated like family. They muttered about how Amin would be spoiled, or how he might grow up to value animals more than humans. Amin didn't let their words bother him. "If people can't understand love," he told his mother one evening, "then it's their loss. She loves me more than anyone else could, and I love her too." One particularly memorable moment came during a village festival. As families gathered to celebrate, Aman walked proudly through the crowd with the dog by his side. Children and adults alike turned to watch the pair, their bond so strong it was almost tangible. "Look at them," one man whispered. "It's as if that dog was sent by Allah himself to protect the boy." Another replied, "Maybe it's time we stopped questioning it and started learning from it." Even the most skeptical villagers began to soften as they watched a man and the dog together. Their loyalty to one another, their trust, and their mutual love spoke louder than any argument ever could. At school, a man began to share the lessons he had learned from his unusual upbringing. For a class project, he wrote an essay titled, "What My Dog Taught Me About Love." In it, he wrote, "Some people think animals are beneath us, but my dog has taught me that love knows no boundaries. She doesn't care where I come from or who I am. She only cares that I'm safe and happy. If we could all love like that, the world would be a better place." The essay earned Aman praise from his teacher and classmates alike. But for Aman, the greatest reward was seeing the dog wag her tail as if she knew what he had written. Their journey together was far from over, but one thing was certain. The bond between Aman and his dog wasn't just unusual. It was extraordinary. It was a reminder that love, loyalty, and kindness could exist in the most unexpected ways, and that sometimes the greatest lessons in life come from the simplest of relationships. At first, the villagers had been skeptical. The idea of a dog being so deeply integrated into a family, treated as a guardian and companion, was hard for many to accept. But as the years passed, the story of Aman and his dog began to change hearts and minds in ways no one could have anticipated. It started with small moments, quiet observations by those who had once whispered in judgment. One morning, an elderly woman watched as the dog accompanied Aman to school. She noticed how the dog stood by the gate, refusing to leave until Aman disappeared into the classroom. "That's not just loyalty," she said to herself. "That's love." Others began to notice the same. The dog wasn't just protecting a man. She was teaching him something the villagers had never expected: compassion, courage, and responsibility. One day, Aman brought home a school project that captured the attention of the entire village. It was a presentation about love and empathy, and Aman chose his dog as the centerpiece. "She taught me that love doesn't ask for anything in return," he said during his speech. "She doesn't care about my past or where I came from. She just loves me for who I am." His words spread through the village like wildfire. Those who had once mocked the family now found themselves reflecting on their own biases. "If a dog can teach a child such valuable lessons," one man said, "then maybe we've been the ones who were wrong." Slowly, attitudes began to shift. Villagers who had once avoided the family out of fear or superstition started visiting their home. They came to see a man and the dog, to ask questions, and to understand the bond that had so deeply affected their community. One woman, who had once been vocal about her disapproval, confessed to Aisha during a visit. "I used to think you were making a mistake, raising a child so closely with an animal, but now I see it's not a mistake at all. It's a blessing." Isha smiled gently and replied, "Love is never a mistake. It's the only thing that makes us truly human." The turning point came during a village gathering. The local school hosted an event to celebrate the children's achievements, and a man was chosen to give a speech. Standing on the small stage with the dog sitting proudly at his side, Aman spoke about what he had learned from his unique upbringing. "My dog isn't just my protector," he said, his voice steady and full of emotion. "She's my teacher. She's taught me that love isn't about who you are or where you come from. It's about what you give to others. She's shown me that loyalty and kindness can change lives. And because of her, I know that every living being, human or animal, deserves respect." The audience was silent for a moment, absorbing his words. Then applause broke out, louder and more heartfelt than anyone had expected. Even the elders, who were often resistant to change, nodded in approval. From that day forward, the dog was no longer seen as just an animal. She became a symbol of something greater, a reminder of the power of love and the lessons it could teach, even to the most skeptical hearts. Villagers began to show more kindness, not just to the family, but to animals in general. Children who had once thrown stones at stray dogs now approached them with cautious affection. Farmers who had treated their livestock as tools of labor began to see them as living creatures worthy of care. One evening, an elderly villager approached Imran and said, "Your family has taught us something we didn't know we needed to learn. That dog of yours, she's opened our eyes to what it means to love unconditionally. We owe her and you a great deal." Imran smiled and replied, "We didn't set out to teach anyone. We were just following what Allah placed in our hearts. The rest came naturally." Aisha and Imran were deeply moved by the change in their community. The very people who had once doubted them were now learning from their story, seeing it not as something strange, but as something beautiful. As for Aman, he continued to grow under the watchful eyes of his parents and his dog. Together, they had not only changed the perception of a village, but also shown that love, in its purest form, could bridge gaps and break barriers that once seemed unmovable. As the years passed, Aman blossomed into a bright, compassionate young boy. His once controversial upbringing with the dog, who had been his first guardian and lifelong companion, became a story of inspiration for the entire village. The whispers of doubt and judgment that had once surrounded his family were now replaced with admiration and respect. One sunny afternoon, the village school hosted a grand event to honor its students. Aman was among those being recognized for his achievements, including his exceptional project on love and empathy, inspired by his bond with the dog. Families gathered in the large courtyard, excited to celebrate, but all eyes turned when Aman arrived, with the dog walking proudly beside him. When it was Aman's turn to speak, he stepped onto the stage and stood tall, the dog sitting at his feet. He began, "I want to thank my parents, my teachers, and my greatest companion, my dog. She has taught me lessons I will carry for the rest of my life." The audience listened intently as a man shared how his dog had not only saved his life, but had also taught him the meaning of love, loyalty, and courage. People say animals are just creatures, but I have learned that they can possess more humanity than we often see in each other. My dog taught me that love is not something you say, it's something you show. The crowd erupted into applause, and even the elders who had once questioned the family's decisions nodded approvingly. For many, a man's words marked a turning point, a realization that compassion extended beyond humans to all living beings. After the event, the villagers came together to honor the dog as well. They brought food, flowers, and gifts as tokens of their respect, acknowledging her role in shaping Aman's character and changing the village's perspective. For the first time, the dog wasn't seen as just an animal, but as a vital part of the family and the community. At home, Aisha and Imran watched with pride as Aman continued to grow into a young man guided by the values they had instilled in him. The dog, though older now, remained by his side, her love and loyalty unwavering. One evening, as the sun set over the village, Aman sat with the dog in their yard. He stroked her fur gently, his voice soft but full of gratitude. "You've been with me through everything," he said. "You protected me when no one else would. You've given me courage and taught me to love without limits. I don't know how to thank you." The dog wagged her tail, her eyes filled with the quiet understanding that had always defined their bond. In that moment, Eamon realized that their relationship wasn't just about survival, it was about the lessons they had taught each other, lessons that would shape him for the rest of his life. As Aman grew older and began to make his way in the world, the values he had learned from his dog remained at the core of who he was. He became known not just for his intelligence and kindness, but for his ability to see the best in others, even in the most unlikely places. The villagers, too, had changed. What began as skepticism and fear had turned into admiration and a deeper understanding of the connections between all living things. The dog, once an object of doubt, had become a symbol of love and loyalty that inspired everyone who knew her story. In her final years, the dog continued to live with the family that had embraced her as one of their own. When she passed, it was a moment of deep sorrow, not just for a man and his parents, but for the entire village. They remembered her not just as a protector, but as a teacher whose lessons would live on in their hearts. As the years went by, Amin carried her memory with him everywhere he went. He often spoke of her to others, sharing the incredible story of how she had saved him and shaped his life. "She wasn't just a dog," he would say. "She was a gift from Allah, a reminder of the love and loyalty that connects all of us, no matter who or what we are." And so, the story of a man and his dog became more than just a tale of survival. It became a legacy, a testament to the power of love, the strength of loyalty, and the lessons we can learn from even the humblest of creatures. In the end, their bond didn't just change a single family or a village. It touched the hearts of everyone who heard it, leaving a lasting message. Humanity isn't just something we find in people. It's something we create through love, compassion, and the connections we share with all living beings.